And we'll get started with the interview.
All right. Dr. Cooper, we appreciate you coming. First of all, tell us about your professional background and why you're interested in being the superintendent of Alexander City School.
Okay, I'll do that. Real quick, I want to thank all the board for spending time with me today. Several of you I've met throughout the day. Had a great day here in Alex City, and just want to take the opportunity to say thank you for showing me around. And but I'll start and give you a little idea about what my professional background has been. I graduated from Auburn University in 1986, and so I've been in education for 27 years. I started that next fall after graduating from Auburn. I started at Mortimer Jordan High School in Jefferson County. There I taught 7th grade social studies. I had successful tenure there, and moved on to teach at Sachs High School, which is in Calhoun County. It's part of the Calhoun County school system. There I taught 12th grade economics and government. And from there I moved to Albertville High School, which is in Marshall County. And there I taught advanced world history, 12th grade economics and government. I also taught biology and physical science. So I spent 12 years in the classroom as a classroom teacher before moving into administration. I think I know what good instruction is. I've been in the classroom. I know the challenges that teachers face daily, but I also know the rewards of teaching. And for me, it was a very rewarding experience. I was passionate about teaching. I love teaching. I love kids. And I love schools. It's all I've ever done my whole life. During that 12 years, I also was a coach. Was involved in athletics. I coached varsity football over that time, and also I was an assistant, and also I was a head baseball coach. So that was a rewarding experience also. And I had a lot of good experiences, a lot of great relationships with those kids too. And so both my teaching experience and my coaching experience gives me a lot of good experiences before I even got into administration. My first administrative job though was at Albertville High School. I served as an assistant principal there for 6 years. Very involved in all facets of the school there. I was fortunate enough to work with a principal there that involved me in all facets of school. Anything from curriculum instruction to, of course, as an assistant principal, discipline kids, work on extracurricular programs and activities, and so just had a great experience there, but a good job. But I felt like I wanted to be a principal, and opportunity came up where I could move to the middle school there. So I moved to the middle school, served as the middle school for 3 years at Albertville Middle School. That was a great experience there. We had 3 years of where we really worked to transform that school and lead it in a new direction. It was a situation where we had a lot of challenges there. We had a high poverty rate. We also had a high ELL population there, about 24%. But we were successful in again transforming the school, really getting the faculty into more of a team concept. I think one thing that we did is we received a comprehensive school reform grant during that time, and we really engaged in professional development during that 3-year period, and had a lot of professional growth and a lot of team building. So again, I think we're very successful there. But then from there, the last 6 years I've spent in the Jasper City school system as an assistant superintendent. I've been involved, my superintendent there has involved me in numerous areas across the whole K-12 spectrum. My primary curriculum instruction responsibility is at the secondary level. I'm over all curriculum instruction programs, but I have been, as we talked today with your principals and with you, the board, I've been involved across the whole spectrum. I've led vertical meetings and vertical planning through all departments, and so I feel comfortable working both at the elementary and the secondary level in curriculum instruction. I'm responsible for coordinating our human resources or personnel in our district, coordinating all personnel evaluations. I work to coordinate a few federal programs, Title II, Title III, and when we had it, Title V. I'm responsible for coordinating the district's professional development across the whole K-12 teaching staff and administrative staff. Coordinate at-risk funds, high hope funds, and children's first funds there. I've coordinated the guidance and counseling department, the library media services for the district, and I'm sure I'm leaving out something, but some other things that I've been involved in there is deeply involved in the budgeting process, deeply involved in the strategic planning process. We have had several construction projects going on there. I've been involved in that. We're planning for a new $61 million high school facility that I work in that area. So I've got a lot of experiences across the central office, and there's one thing though that I think is one of my strengths is the fact that I know curriculum instruction. I know what good teaching looks like, and I think that's the most important area to is in the superintendent. Not the only area, but it's one of the most important areas that you have to be strong in, because there's nothing that affects your school district and your student achievement greater than the instruction that goes on in your district. So I think that's one of my strengths. And real quick, why do I want to be a superintendent in Alex City? Well, first of all, I know that you got a great school system here, and I've done my homework, and I know the history of this school district. I know that it's a very community-oriented school district with a lot of community support. And you've got good instruction going on. You've had a great history of superintendents in this district, and I want to be your next great superintendent in Alex City. The second reason I like this district and I'm interested is I think it's a good fit for me, and I think I'm a good fit for you, and I think that's important. I've worked in 4 different districts that are all very similar to Alex City in different ways. Number one is every district that I worked in, the high schools are about the same size as the classes, the number of kids coming through each class. All the high schools have been 5A high schools. I know Alex City is a high school. Ben Russell is a 5A high school. So that's a good fit. Also, the diversity that the different districts that I've worked in, whether it be the poverty or the different ethnic groups that were in those districts. I've worked and walked with all different types of people in all those communities and been very successful. So I think it's a good fit. And the last thing is I think Alex is a good community to live in and work in. And I want to, wherever I go, I want that type of community. I want to be happy, I want my family to be happy, and I think Alex City is definitely a place that my family can be happy.
Let's talk about the role of a superintendent. Describe or tell us how you feel your role as a superintendent would be when it relates to, first of all, the board itself. Let's look at employee groups, the students, and the community.
The superintendent's role of all those groups is to be a leader and an advocate, and to identify well with every single one of those groups and to spend a lot of time engaging those groups. You know, there's several important functions as superintendent. There's helping a district develop their vision and mission. There's carrying out the physical function. There's the instructional leadership function, and there's a personnel function. And all those functions really relate to those 4 groups that you just talked about. So I've got to be involved with all those groups. I've got to be very approachable. I have to be someone that's willing to get out there and engage in those groups. You know, I can't put myself up on a pedestal or a throne and be standoffish. I've got to be very accessible to all those groups. They have to see me in the schools, and they have to see me. They have to understand that I've got the interest of the kids in this school district at heart, and I'm going to do the best job for them. And I'm always going to keep the kids' instruction and student development and achievement first in hand. As far as the board goes, you know, it's my responsibility to work with you. You're my boss. You're the legislative, the policy-making body. You're for this school district. You represent the community as a whole. You're supposed to ensure that what the community wants in the school system is taking place. And so I see, you know, you as the legislative body, but you hire me also to work on your team. I've got to be a team member. We've got to do this together. And I think we've got to have a great relationship. We've got to be open and honest with each other. But I've got to, you know, I've got to be your living embodiment as far as the board goes. You can't be here every day. You spent more time. We've talked about, you know, the time that you've been able to spend in the schools the last few days. You know, you're not here every day. You hire me to run the school system on a day-to-day basis. So, but I have to understand that you're my boss, and we have to have a good working relationship. I have to keep you informed. So, you know, that's one thing that I think you hire me to run the school system, but at the same time, you've got to be involved, and I've got to keep you involved and keep you informed. You know, the kids, the students, you know, I've got to really, again, first of all, be an advocate for the kids and be an advocate for the schools. But kids need to know that I have their interests at heart. They have to know that I'm the superintendent. In other words, do you even know your superintendent? Does the superintendent ever come into the schools and visit? And do they ever engage kids? And do they go into the classrooms? And I would do that. It's important that kids see me as someone that's the leader of the district and the leader of all groups, but they need to be able to, you know, communicate with me and have me to be in their classrooms, and you know, they see me at their activities. They should know who I am, and again, I think the main thing is to try to provide them the best school system possible. I have to be an advocate for them and ensure that everything we do revolves around their academic achievement and their development, you know, socially, emotionally, and physically. So that's my relationship with the students. The different groups, the worker groups, teachers, support staff, you know, same thing. I've got to be an advocate for them also. I've got to be a colleague. But more than anything, I've got to be their leader. But I can't be, again, standoffish. I've got to be really someone that engages them and is there to work with them and not to direct everything they do, not to mandate things, but to work with them to figure out what's the best thing for the school district and to bring about good changes for the district. So again, that's how I see my role. Again, I have to provide leadership, and I've got to provide resources for them to be successful. But I think that, again, I've got to be a part of their team. We got to be one team together. The community, as a superintendent, my role is to advocate for the schools to the community. So in order to do that, I have to know the community. I have to be out in the community. I have to work with the community and give them tons of information and engage them in several different ways. And I would do that. Every school system I've ever worked in, I've lived in that community, and I've been a part of the community. So, you know, we have to engage the community and give them a lot of information about the schools and make them feel good about the schools in order for them to support us. So, you know, I've got to be a leader of all four of those groups you mentioned. I have to provide guidance, motivation for all those and advocate for them. Okay?
Speaking about the students and how they would see you, Cooper, I thought it was an interesting day. We were at the middle school and some of the students asked if we were all policemen. But the next question, Dr. Cooper, relates to communication and the method you would use to communicate with the board. Specifically, if you could talk about how you would identify those situations where there's a consultation needed for a decision of the board versus just providing information.
First of all, I'll talk about just general communication. You know, I said already that we have to be a team. And I've got to provide you a lot of information. And first, you know, I'll communicate with you however you direct me to communicate. But my idea is that communication is always very open and honest. And that I provide you tons of information. You need to know you're out there in the community and people are talking to you and asking you questions. And so I just got to give you a lot of general information. I'm not talking about anything necessarily. I think I've just got to give you information what's going on in the schools, what we're being successful at, what some of our challenges are, and so forth. So providing you information, having open and honest communication. You know, I'm not going to surprise you. I'm not going to pit one of you against the other or try to divide us into factions. We have to be one mindset, one accord, one heartbeat. And so to do that, I've got to communicate with you. I've got to give you a lot of information. You know, I think you hire me to do superintendent's job. My job is to carry out the policies that you set and to run the school district on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I would do. I don't expect to have to call you to make every decision that I would make. And I don't really think that you expect me to do that either. I think you would expect me to stay in close contact with you if in certain situations. You know, for example, when would you need to be contacted before a decision is made? Well, some of those things, either where I would seek advice from you or get your input, or we'd decide, you know, that we need to get together and have a board meeting or whatever and make a decision. But, you know, those are major areas. First of all, anything controversial, for sure. You know, I would need to get the information, maybe seek your advice, maybe, you know, and of course, anything to do with legal matters, serious legal matters, anything to do with safety and order in the schools. Well, that's a very important area that we're all concerned about these days. You know, it's something where you know, that's the number one concern parents have. They have first is the safety and order in the schools. You know, yes, they want their children to learn, but they, you know, kids have to be safe first. So anything to do with that, anything to do with controversial matters, personnel matters that are, you know, sticky type personnel matters. Also anything to do, of course, with facility issues. Those are just some examples where I feel like I might need to call and talk to you. My way of communicating probably would be, first of all, I use a cell phone all the time, whether it be, you know, direct calls or text. And if it's okay with you, I would communicate to you and give you information daily, weekly, whenever. I would probably try to send you some type of email blast with just a weekly update and some weekly points that I feel like that you need to know, you know, on a regular basis. Again, I'll communicate however you want me to communicate. I think it's something where, though, that there has to be communication. And you've got to communicate with me, and I've got to communicate with you. And we got to serve, again, as that one team that leads this school district, and it's got the best interest of our kids at hand, and that everything we do for instruction, student development, student achievement. We keep that in mind, we'll be doing good. But as far as communication, you know, I think there's some main ways that I would communicate with you: email blast, phones, just direct contact. So I guess that's that on that question.
Very good. If I may,
Sure.
Frequency of the board meetings, what do you do now?
Well, we have one board meeting a month in the
Okay.
district I work in, and that's what the board, the districts I worked in, that's the case. Now, there are occasionally work sessions, and that's one way to communicate with you, to get information. I don't know how frequently, or if you have work sessions at all. Actually, the district that I work in at now, they do not have set work sessions. I actually just led 3 work sessions on secondary scheduling that we had. I say I led it. It was a board work session, but I helped facilitate it with the board. And but they don't have set board work sessions.
Okay.
But we'll do whatever you think that we need to do. And again, that's another way I can communicate with you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Dr. Cooper, talk a little bit about the role of the superintendent in stimulating the faculty toward professional growth and self-development, and also maybe outline a few of the programs you feel that would provide the adequate professional growth or development for the staff.
My role as the superintendent is to expect everyone in the school district to be committed to professional growth. There's any good organization, any good professional person, it doesn't matter if you're in the first day of your job or you're in your 30th year, you need to be committed to learning new skills, new knowledge, and that you're going to make yourself a better professional. And so my job as a superintendent is to ensure that we've got something like that in place here. My job is to be the leader of that process. My job is to be the cheerleader, the coach, the motivator, okay? So it's to provide resources, it's to make sure that there's structure set. So as a superintendent, it's my job to lead that entire process. And when I say professional development or professional, it's not just for teachers. It's for myself, number one, superintendent. And it's also for you. You know, you're as a board, asked by the Alabama School Board Association to participate in training, but then it goes all the way down in, you know, to central office, the other central office administrators and staff, and of course down the building principals and administrators, the teaching staff. There's nothing that's going to improve the school system more than what we do for teachers in professional development. The number one way research says is if you want to improve instruction, or if you want to maintain high levels of achievement, is you have to improve the instruction. So if you want to improve academic achievement, focus on professional growth in the area of quality instruction. So, you know, it's my role to lead that process. The different types of programs that I feel are effective is for sure not a one-time workshop. It's, you know, and not a one-time go one day and you get a lot out of it, because you're not going to get a lot out of that. You know, those days are gone by, and you know, I think any professional development to be successful has to be, I like for it to be job embedded, where it's something where it's an ongoing process, and it's not like, again, a one day deal, where it's something where we focus on an area, we engage teachers in a specific, fine, focused area, and try to study and try to engage those teachers in a process over a long period of time where they're actually collaborating and, with other teachers and focusing on that area. They're actually reflecting and having dialogue together, and they're modeling for each other, doing actually research maybe, or coming into observations with each other. I think a job embedded is very important where we're doing it in the schools. I like professional learning communities, the concept of professional learning communities. And again, there's where you're trying to create a focus area for either, it could be the whole school, or it could be small groups of teachers. For example, if you're in an elementary school, kindergarten teachers might focus in one area and they commit to professional learning over a period of time, and then their professional learning community, their focus area might be totally different from those teachers that are in second grade, or it could be the same, but it may have a little bit different bend on it. But I like the idea of professional learning communities where you're looking at trying to have that one focus on something and really studying it over a period of time. Now, you can do a lot of different things. You can really engage your own faculty and seek your own teacher leaders and really organize professional development in-house and not bring in anybody. And that's very effective. We've been very effective in the districts I've worked in doing a lot of that. Sometimes, though, you need outside resources. And there's a lot of different areas that you can look for outside resources. We've been very successful in the district I'm in right now, working with our in-service center at the University of North Alabama. We have also partnered with some higher colleges and universities and did some things, and having some different people from those come in and work with their teachers over a period of time. You can contract with vendors and bring them in. It's more costly, and some of those are good. But I think you get a lot out of in-house teacher leaders. Establishing partnerships with either university or in-service centers and trying to do professional development. Of course, the State Department offers a lot. In our district, just like I'm sure here, the last really a year and a half, 2 years, we've been providing professional development from the State Department concerning the implementation of the college and career readiness standards. And what we did is we took teams to those meetings, and then we engaged those. We went through the training the State Department provided, and then we had dialogue amongst that group. And then we had plans where we actually came back and turned that training around in our district. And then it was not just a one-day deal, though. We'd have meetings and plan department meetings and grade level meetings and further development and further dialogue and further study related to that, and further development of curriculum plans from that. One of the things that we've been really successful for that's been exciting in the past year is, and it's an example of job embedded PLC type professional development, is we've really had a focus on integrating technology into our instruction and engaging kids in project-based type learning. And so I mentioned the in-service center. We engaged in a partnership with them. There's one person there that we really engaged with and brought him into our district, and we first started with administrators, and we spent time last spring with our administrators doing professional development related to technology, and then we just built a plan from there where it was just all encompassing for administrators, central office administrators, to building administrators, to what we're going to do with the different levels of our teaching staff, and then even specific things that we want to do with our students, have our teachers do with the students. there was just so many components to that. You know, one, we had 4 early release days in our district, where our kids came in for half a day, they released, and we had professional development in that area. Another big component of that training was Intel training. We used the Intel curriculum and Intel 2s in that. So I don't want to go on too much, but that's just an example of what we might do professional development wise. It's very important though. There's nothing that we can do more important than grow as professionals and develop our teachers, administrators.
Okay. You mentioned in your in the first, as you were telling us a little bit about yourself, your ability to recognize good instructional programming. So how would you evaluate the instructional program, and how would you go about potentially making changes to the extent you saw necessary?
Well, I think you've got to evaluate your instructional program both on a quantitative and a qualitative basis. As a superintendent, I've got a lot, especially on a qualitative type manner, I've got to engage a lot of different groups and spend a lot of time talking and listening to people. And first of all, I wouldn't come in here and start changing anything and making wholesale changes. If there's something to do with safety and order and some basic changes where I feel like that we just have to make, then I would make that decision and make those changes. But as far as really true big instructional changes, I've got to have some time. I've got to have some time to work with teacher groups, building administrator groups, and really hear their needs and see where they think we are. We've got to understand where we are, and you've got to understand why there's a need for change even. So, but I wouldn't say we're going to change just to be changing. You know, we got to have a reason and know why we're changing and know how we're going to change. So a lot of that is spending time with staff. And so I for sure would do that first. You got to look at quantitative data too, and to see, you know, where are we? Where are our instructional programs? At what level are our kids achieving? Where are we missing the boat instructionally? So, you know, you've got to engage your teachers in a continuous improvement process. One thing, you've got to, and I'm sure you've got some type of continuous improvement process in place, but that's important. And it's important to not only have it in place, but to do it well and to really do it. Because you can create all kinds of plans and put them on a shelf, and they'll collect dust if you don't, you know, really concentrate on what you're doing and expect everyone to participate in that process and to carry out that process. So that's important. That continuous improvement process, you know, again, you got the teachers and the staff got to be involved in that. They've got to be challenged to really dig into that data and look at, you know, individual or different groups, small groups, entire, you know, overall the class groups, to be able to see, you know, where are we, where are we not being successful. And then after we identify those areas, we got to develop those plans and put those in place with specific, you know, first of all, goals. You got to have goals. They got to be specific type goals that are spelled out, and then after goals, we have to put our action plans in place. And then from action plans, we need to have some benchmarks to understand and some points during the year where we're going to come back and revisit and make sure that we're, you know, on target with our carrying out that continuous improvement process. So if you're talking about change or evaluating curriculum, that's the question we're on. I think you got to involve the staff members, and you got to involve people in looking at data to see how we're doing curriculum-wise. You know, a lot of people who don't like it, but test scores are a huge part of that. I mean, You gotta look at test scores. They're not the only thing we do. They shouldn't drive everything we do. Again, I think qualitative data is very important too. There's a lot of different things, but if you're going to evaluate curriculum programs, you're going to have to use the data to look at that.
Dr. Cooper, the next question was if you could give us your experiences in developing, implementing, and evaluating curriculum programs and how they measured student achievement.
Okay. There's two areas that I've had a lot of experience in that I want to talk about, and I'll try. And then there's two others that are something that we've been involved in the last couple, 2 or 3 years. The two areas, one is curriculum mapping and one is benchmark assessments. Curriculum mapping I've been involved in for several years, all the way back to when I was an assistant principal, leading different departments and creating curriculum maps. And what's a curriculum map? To me, a curriculum map is a big snapshot of your course, and it's important because research tell you that it's important to have a guaranteed and viable curriculum, and a guaranteed curriculum. That whole process does guarantee. It's a process, a part of guaranteeing that if Johnny's in first grade, okay, he's going to get a similar type instructional dose of reading as Sally, who's with another teacher, okay, down the hall. Because that doesn't mean that they're going to teach exactly the same every day. There's not going to be any instructional freedom for teachers. It just means that you got to get together and you got to plan curriculum over a period of time and create this large snapshot of what your plan is going to look like. And so curriculum mapping involves, first of all, ensuring that all your standards that we're by law supposed to teach is included there. It doesn't say, though, that we have to teach each standard for 2 weeks or 1 week or 1 day or whatever. We have to figure out which of those standards are important. They're all important, but which ones are really important? Which ones do we have to drive home and make sure that our kids, they understand the skills and the content related to those standards? Which ones are what we call, a lot of people call them power standards. A lot of people, whatever you want to call them, you got to identify. There's got to be a process that's saying, these are all of our standards, but these are the ones that we got to make sure that our kids, that we got to give a lot of instruction and make sure that our kids understand the skills and the content related to those standards. So that's part of the curriculum map. The first thing is to make sure that your standards are included in all your units, and then also from that point, you're going to develop what you would call essential questions or either essential content. In other words, if I teach a unit, what are the most important essential items that my kids should get out of that unit? So we actually identify those in the curriculum mapping process. And again, there's a lot of different ways to do it. Some people they just identify the content. Some of them put them in a question format. The main thing is just to identify those essential items. I also think that from there you have to identify the key content of vocabulary. Vocabulary is very important to building knowledge, and it's got to be content-specific vocabulary. If you're going to lead kids to higher order thinking and learning, you've got to make sure they've got to have a good base with the vocabulary, the content vocabulary in that area. So part of the map would include the content vocabulary. And then you're looking at also identifying some major activities that might be included in that unit. That's not a lesson plan, though, remember. Again, there's teacher freedom. But there may be certain things or certain activities we want all our kids to be exposed to. And so, we would list those activities. We'd spell them out there. And then, but beyond activities, also you would identify your resources that you would use in that unit. And that's anything from textbooks to primary and secondary reading sources to websites to whatever. You know, you just got to lay out your resources. And then you identify maybe some assessments that would be part of that unit. And, you know, we've had some success also developing some common assessments with the units in that process. So, but what we're doing here is we're just identifying what we're going to teach and what we want our kids to get. And by doing that, we're explicit. You know, that curriculum is well articulated. It's, you know, and we want to ensure that, you know, again, it's viable. It fits into our time frame. Can we actually even teach what's on paper, or is it just a plan that we're again creating and putting on the shelf, and it's collecting dust over a period of time? So teachers and administrators, they got to work and they got to be honest in creating this. I think that that's very important. You know, we've been very successful in the district I work in now. I was successful as building principal, creating those, and you know, we had a lot of good success with student achievement, increases in student achievement in a lot of different areas, and I think that's one of the main reasons. Real quick, Locke, benchmark assessments. You got to have to understand. You got to start and understand where your kids are before you start instructing. And I think the benchmarks give you an idea where your kids are in regard to the standards that you're supposed to teach, and those benchmark assessments should guide your instruction. They're very important in guiding your instruction throughout the year, and to address the needs of individual students, or to address the needs of large groups. For example, I may be a secondary teacher, and I don't know, I may teach 5 classes a day, and I may have 2 classes that is after I give that benchmark assessment that, you know, there's one area that all my kids in there just about, you know, they know that skill or whatever it is. So I don't really need to spend a lot of time beating a dead horse. I need to go on and carry them to another level. But at the same time, I may have 3 other groups that I'm teaching throughout the day that if I look at the data and I see them struggling more. So I may have to change my lessons just a little bit in order to adapt to meet the needs of the kids and meet their needs. So the benchmark can be given, you know, in the district. Normally, when I was a building principal and also as a district administrator, we have given the benchmark assessment no more than 3 times a year, but at least twice a year. And again, we want to see a snapshot of where they're at when we begin the school year, and then, you know, we used to like to give it beginning of the year and then like maybe in January, February to see where we're at, and then we could see, are we making any gains, and then are we still struggling in areas, and then we could adjust our instruction again and target areas to maybe you know, finish out the rest of the year, and then also to prepare them for state assessments. It's also important to evaluate your instruction too, because you can see where your kids started and where did you carry them at the end of the year. You know, so the benchmark assessments are important. Okay, a couple other things that I think are important that we've done the last couple of years is, number one, getting technology into the classroom, not just for teachers, but getting technology where kids are using it in the classroom to, you know, to learn and to get engaged and to research and study and to create projects. So, you know, teachers have got to figure out ways to do that, and we have tried to do that in the district that I've been working in over the past 6 years. We were able to, we talked today, you know, I've been involved in the past year of a one-to-one initiative, K through 12. Our kids, K2 have iPods, and they have a card in their room where they keep those in the room, but then our kids 3 through 12 actually have their own iPads, and they carry those back and forth. And that goes back to that professional development that I was talking about before, is really, you know, we've ask our teachers to use project-based learning more in a classroom. Engage the kids in creating their knowledge and not just, you know, being fed knowledge. So I think technology integration in the classroom is a program, a technology program that we have developed and implemented, and I think we're seeing great results already, because you walk into a classroom and those kids are engaged. I mean, they love the technology, and we hear from their parents, and so I think that's to the degree that you can. I think it's important to use technology in the classroom. And again, it's important to have those 21st century classrooms, and we've done that in our district too, where we're trying to provide the smart boards and the projectors and the document cameras and things like that. That's important. The teachers need those tools, and they can engage kids with those tools too. But it's also been good to have technology in the hands of the kids. One last quick thing is we've been very successful at our secondary level with our honors program in the district that I work in now. We have extended that honors program. We've had it in place for several years, but it just wasn't clicking. And so we've revamped the honors program, added additional courses. We've really had gone from a small handful of AP courses to where this fall we'll be teaching eight AP courses at our high school level. But even just as important is the AP courses is all the pre-AP type and honors type courses that we put in place all the way down into the middle school. And we're asking the middle school even to put in more next year. We've got some honors courses in math, some in language already in, and again, we're looking to increase those honor courses all the way down into the middle school science and even middle school social studies. But we offer an honors diploma, and we always say, if a kid comes through our school, if they're interested in having a rigorous track, we're going to offer them that. All kids, they don't need that. All kids are not interested in that. But if our kids want that, then we're going to provide that. And we've done that in the school district. We've been very successful. We've increased the numbers. We've increased our AP scores. We have good ACT scores in place. Our graduation rates are great. We've been all the way to even to 96% on our graduation rate in the last year. Anywhere from 89 to 96%, and it's actually back down to 89 now because of the new graduation formula that they're using, and everybody's graduation rate is less than it was the last couple of years because of that new formula. But those are four types of programs or things that we've done to try to increase achievement in our district. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Cooper, throughout the day as we walk around to our schools, we talk to principals, reading coaches, reading teachers, math teachers, we talk to instructional coaches, and they've all came up with different programs we tried. You're talking about programs you tried, and some work, some don't. Some are good, some are bad. Some they love, some they hate. What are some of the major problems which prevent the improvement of quality instructional programs?
Well, first of all, people are naturally resistant to change, and you can't mandate change. You've got to work and help people understand why there needs to be a change, and understand why there needs to be a change and how we're going to change it, how we're going to be better off down the road if we make changes. So problems are number one is the lack of focus. We can't do everything. We can't implement every fad that comes along. We can't buy every tool and use every instructional tool there is out there on the market. They'll send you, we get administrators 40 emails a day from vendors trying to sell us something to use in our schools. But whatever we do, we have to have a focus. And we got to understand where our weak areas are, zero in on those areas, and then we got to pick a few of those areas and really spend some time, like I said, going back to that professional development, providing professional development, putting structures in place in order for us to be successful and to really make those improvements. The other thing is commitment. It's kind of like, I've heard the story before, a lot of times we go into an initiative and we build this great, looking sailboat, and we set it a sail for the dock, and we wave goodbye as it sets sail, but we never do check back in on it again or anything. We just expect it to do well and to go on and everything. If we're going to expect something as far as improvements, and we put in initiatives, we've got to be committed to that. We've got to put in the structure and the resources that need to be successful. We've got to put in place something in order to monitor how we're doing, and if we're not doing a good job and meeting our targets, then we got to adjust, and then we got to have an evaluation process in place too. So, I think a lot of the problems is, again, the lack of focus, the lack of commitment. I think another thing too is, today in our conversations, I heard somebody say something, getting out of the box, okay? And there's a thing called first order change versus second order change. And, a lot of things that a lot of problems that we face, we have to implement first order change. And really first order change is where you just do something a little bit different than what you've done before. You don't change everything. You're just kind of moving some things around and putting a few twists in and so forth. So a lot of things that we can make some improvements by making some first order change. But second order change, it requires more than that. It requires a new paradigm. Okay, I think you have to bring an open mind, and it's not just thinking out of the box. Sometimes the second order change requires, it's like getting completely out of the box and thinking totally different than you've ever thought before, and incorporating or learning new skills and new knowledge and new skills. So, sometimes we try to apply first order change to a problem where really we probably need to look at, making a wholesale change and going in and trying to make that second order change with a whole new paradigm. And I'm not saying everything's got to be done like that, but I think sometimes we just try to change things around a little bit, but we don't really look for real change. Any change you do, though, you got to have buy-in from staff. And so, in order to have buy-in, you got to engage them, and you got to understand. They have to understand that you're interested in their ideas. So, anyway, that's my answer regarding that question.
Next question, Dr. Cooper. In relation to principals, to what degree do you believe responsibilities should be delegated to principals, and how do you go about monitoring their execution of those delegated responsibilities?
Okay. Well, a principal's delegated in a lot of areas. They're responsible for their schools. That's what I believe. I think we hire them to run their schools, and we give them a lot of autonomy to make decisions and run their schools. Myself as a superintendent, I'm working with them, and I'm going to be. I would give them advice, and it's kind of like that same relationship that we talked about earlier between the superintendent and the board. I got to have that same type of relationship with the principal, and they got to have that with me. They should want that type of relationship where we're honest with each other and we can communicate and we have a relationship that we can trust each other. But really, I would expect principals to run their schools. I think they have to make decisions. I think they should be, number one, interested in the instructional program, and they should have a focus of student instruction and student achievement and instruction in their schools. So They had to be concerned with everything, though. They had to make sure that the lunch tastes, good. And they had to make sure the plumbing's working. And they had to make sure that we've got coverage at extracurricular activities. And they had to make sure that, our band program is performing well, and they're participating in activity or competitions and things like that. So the principals are really in charge of everything in their school, and they're held accountable. They should be held accountable for everything. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't expect them to communicate with me, just like, again, going back with our communication between the superintendent and the board. They need to give me information. They need to seek my advice sometimes. Sometimes I will direct principals when I feel like that I need to in a certain specific way. But I shouldn't have to make every decision for them. They should be able to make decisions without me. But again, I think there's some defined autonomy. I think, there's some non-negotiables that I would ask the principals to have in place in their schools. I've already said one is safety and order. I think that's very important. But the other is, is putting that the continuous improvement process in, is to have a good articulated curriculum in their schools, to have some type of benchmark type of assessment program in there where they can understand where their kids are, and it can help guide their instruction, they can help evaluate the instruction. Those are some areas where I think, and there may be some others, but those are some areas where I think they're non-negotiables that you can't, and they got to have some achievement results too in their schools. We got to look at achievement. Again, test scores are not, all there is, but they're important, and we have to be concerned with them. So there's some non-negotiables, but I really, I like working with principals. I was a principal before myself, and I don't, when I pull out up in the parking lot for them to say, oh my gosh, here comes Dr. Cooper, I want them to come out on the front porch and greet me and want to talk. And I think I've got great relationships with the principals that I've worked with over the years. I would ask you to call them and talk to them and ask what type of relationships that I have with them and what I expect of them. I expect, I have high expectations, and I expect our principals to have high expectations. And I expect our principals to have high expectations for their staff and their students in their school. But at the same time, I think I'm very easy to work with, and I'm very personable. I care about our administrators and our teachers in our school, but I'm their leader too, and so, again, good relationships with the principals, but principals have got to run their schools.
Thank you.
Dr. Cooper, talk a little bit about the importance of strategic planning and your role as superintendent in that process.
Well, again, that's another process I've got to lead. I've got to engage a lot of stakeholder groups in that. The process is a rather lengthy process in order to really create a strategic plan and to create one that's meaningful and that actually sets some good goals and gets some things done. Again, the superintendent's got to be involved. They got to involve the board. They got involved in the administrator groups, the teacher groups, parents groups, student groups, community groups. Go back to the teachers, not just teachers, but support staff have got to be engaged. And so I've got to be the leader of the whole process, and I've got to help put that in place and ensure that it happens. I want to give you a little idea of what I consider to be a good strategic model. You can set it up a lot of different ways, but I like this. We do something similar to this in the district, not exactly like this, but we do it in the district I'm at now. But I think one thing you got to do is you got to identify your purpose as an organization. Why do we exist? So, we've got to engage everybody to let's that shouldn't be hard really to do though, but I mean, we do need to identify, what our purpose is as an organization. Then you got to have a vision. And I know y'all have vision and you have a mission statement. I've seen it out in your schools and everything. And, but we got to revisit that too and make sure that's still our vision and our mission. But anyway, the vision is, what do you want to achieve as an organization? What are you about? That's got to be your vision. You identify that. And then your mission is really, how do you go about as an organization trying to achieve your mission? That should be, or the mission is how do we go about trying to achieve our vision. And then beyond those three items, I think that you got to identify as a district, you got to identify your core values and your core tenets that you're going to operate. So these are, this is how we behave and what we believe in. So those are important. From there, you would establish goals, specific goals. And usually, this plan, you'd have 5 years worth of goals, and they would be in different areas, anything from curriculum instruction to transportation to technology to whatever. And then you'd also put in benchmarks to make sure some targets for the different goals, and where you can regularly come back, probably at least on a yearly basis, and check in and see, how are we doing? Are we meeting our benchmarks? If not, do we need to adjust? The plans are not in concrete; they can always be amended. It doesn't have to be 5 years; it can be longer, but 5 years is very common, and so. I think it's a very important process, and also I think I need to lead that process, but I've got to engage those other people. We're going to start creating that plan, have a lot of dialogue. There may be several drafts of that until we hammer out what's something that we can all agree upon. And again, I would be in charge of that process.
Can we go a little bit deeper in that, which I'll ask everyone this? Our strategy here as written is states to investing in the whole child. Please explain to me, or briefly explain to me, how would you plan to support investing in that whole child, especially when there are some coming from poverty homes or property itself, and don't have any support at home, don't have any kind of motivation or anything like that? How would you narrow it down to target that group?
Well, you do have to be concerned with the whole child. I think we need to have a whole child approach. We need to be concerned not only with their academic progress, but the social, emotional, physical well-being of all children. Okay, we have to identify those needs and try to put in either programs or personnel to target those areas. And then not only the programs and personnel, but those people have got to target by identifying the weaknesses for those groups, areas academically. They got to identify where the weakness is, and then they have to plan instruction to attack those weaknesses. So you do have different groups here. You have high poverty. You have other groups that don't perform as well maybe as your whole entire student population. You have gaps. And so, what do you do as an organization, or what do you do as a district? You look to attack those gaps and try to lessen the gap between the entire student population and those different groups. So, you're going to have to look at that, identify the problems. And I'm really talking about academics here, but you got to put in other things in place too. Programs help kids in a lot of different ways beyond just academic achievement. So you look for programs where kids can have something to anchor to, and to keep them in school. You also look for things like, for example, I've asked today about preschool. Preschool is something where it helps those kids from those disadvantaged homes and those high poverty, and so that's something where I don't know what all you do here in the district or in this city as far as preschool goes. Very important though, especially for those kids that live in those poverty settings. So something if we don't provide that, we need to make sure that we work with those that are to do everything we can do to support that. So I don't know if I answered your question. I think it's very important to understand that we need to be concerned again with all kids, support them in several different ways. Your counselors are very involved too, identifying those kids that need support and providing different types of support, whether it's through the school itself or with outside organizations, community organizations, community agencies. For example, I'm involved with Walker County Children's Policies Council, and I remember that board there, and that's part of that whole organization. It's the whole family, the whole umbrella of the different community agencies and how they can positively affect kids, whether it's a kid that's got a drug problem or a kid that's been abused or a kid that's whatever. So anyway.
May I ask one question in relation to that, Dr. Cooper? Strategic plans, we talk about 5-year, and that is very common. There will be needs, I guess, if we want to build a school or whatnot, we need to look a little further out. You'd mentioned 5-year plan. Basically, each year you're doing an assessment, so rolling 5-year strategic plan, I guess, you're doing 5 years every year kind of thing. Drop one, add one. Budgeting in relation to the plan. Do you see that coupled with strategic plan?
So I definitely see it coupled with strategic planning, and I think, you're talking about facilities, yeah, I mean, you may not put it in the strategic plan, or if you want to include more than 5 years in there, but you got to look long range. Where we got 5 schools here. Is that right?
Yeah, central office.
Okay, yeah. We got 5 schools, a central office, and here are all these facilities. So where do they stand? In other words, what do we got to look like? What do we got to do over a long period of time in order to keep our schools in good shape, or make plans to replace those buildings and create new facilities? So yeah, I mean, that's part of strategic planning, it's part of budgeting. You've got to have goals to do that.
Thank you.
Sort of I guess as a tie into that, Dr. Cooper, how do you see the superintendent's role in budgeting and fiscal management, as well as the boards, in conjunction with that?
That's very important. I've got to lead that process again. I've got to work with you, the board. We got to be very dependent on our CSFO and have a great relationship with our CSFO to give us a lot of good information to allow us to make good, sound decisions. We have to, first of all, I got to know the process. I got to know what the Alabama Foundation program, how we get revenues through the Alabama Foundation program. How the average daily membership 20 days after Labor Day is used to create or to determine our teacher allocations. I have to know, how our other current expenses are allocated yearly, because I got to stay, and I need to know that I got to stay attuned to what's going on in Montgomery, because that's set by the legislature each spring. It's something that fluctuates, and how that affects our budget. I've got to know if the legislature is going to raise the divisors, how that's going to affect also our local units, and if we're not careful, we can wind up with too many units that we're paying for on a local basis and everything. I know the Alabama Foundation program. I know how it funds schools. I know what's required locally as matchbacks. I need to know, though, not only the Alabama program, I need to know about federal funds, how that affects our schools and our budgets. I need to know about local funds, local revenues, where they're coming from, how much they are, how much they fluctuate. So I need to understand the process. I think I do understand that process. I think it's my job to lead the process, again, with the board, and the CSFO working closer together. But we got to engage other groups too. You know, we got to engage. I got to engage after we probably get together and set some goals. Number one, you know, in other words, where do you want your reserves? You know, where do you want? You know, are those building plans that you're thinking about? You know, for example, here I know that, you know, 3 years ago y'all were reserve-wise. You know, you're like many other school districts across Alabama because of the financial difficulties that we're facing. You know, you're under 1 month's reserve nearly. And I'm speaking just in your general fund, about $1.4 million. But y'all made great strides over the last 3 years, and it looks like to me, from just looking at your budget statements, that you're close to a 2-month reserve in your, again, just general fund, not all your funds, but general fund. And I think this is admirable of the board to be able to do that. I know you probably had to make some tough decisions, and that's not always popular, but you've got, for the sake of the school system, you got to be on strong financial footing. We got to be good stewards of our public funds, and we have to show good control. And so, anyway, so we have set goals, and I personally think that, you know, it'd be great to have somewhere between about 2.5 to 3 months reserve. And then, but we're not a bank. We don't want to, you know, have a savings loan where we're banking a lot of money. But I think that allows for those difficult times, and you know, to be able to survive those difficult times if you have a good reserve. So anyway, I would involve you guys, the CSFO, the other district office staff that coordinate the different programs. They would have to be involved, along with the principals and other teacher groups, parent groups, and so forth. So, you know, I got to lead that process. I got to know, understand it, and it's just important because we can't catch ourselves in a bad position. So budgeting is very important. That process starts again after, you know, the fall. We should get somewhat of an idea of where numbers are and how many units we might earn, and so we can start looking at that. And then by the turn of the year, we start engaging groups about, you know, here's you know, where we spent our money in the past, but, you know, what are some things that we might want to do different, or what are some of your goals in your departments or your areas or your school that you're looking to carry out, and where you're going to have to change your what you've done in the past from what you've done in the past financially. So so you begin to engage those groups and get some preliminary budgets in place. You got to prioritize. I've not mentioned that. I always think should have, where it's really must have, should have, nice to have. The must have are really those top level priorities where we really don't have a lot of discretion there, because it's you know, the staff's going to eat up 70 to 80% of your budget in the first place. You earn those funds from the state. You got to spend those allocated funds for staff, but you got a budget for it. Federal funds come into play there, though. Also, probably the second largest expenditure you're going to have is utilities. You got to make sure you pay your utilities, the power bill. Also, another one is your debt considerations. You got to cover your debt considerations. I know y'all have debt considerations, so you got a budget for that. And then also other, you know, required items such as classroom instructional support, you know, textbooks, classroom materials. Those things are all required by law to do that. And so those are the must-haves, and you got to have the should-haves. Those are things that really are critical for carrying out the instructional program in your schools, and that's anything from additional staff to actual, you know, resources, instructional resources, maybe some facility things that really need to be done. I'll go back up to the first level too. You got to make sure on that first level that you attend to anything facility-wise that's related to safety and related to just the general, making sure the facility is sound and safe. You know, get at that. But then back to the should-haves is those are those things, again, that are critical to carry out the instructional program in your school. And then you have the nice to haves. And the nice to haves are those things that, it's the gravy on top. It's the even more additional staff. It's the new technologies, new facilities, new programs, putting programs in, whether it be, I know we talked about our fine arts programs and career tags and things like that, preschool I talked about, maybe considering, but you gotta have, you gotta meet your goals first. So if you're not, when you're budgeting, if you got a certain point you want to hit, those are the first things you're going to start cutting if you're not meeting those numbers, that last group right there. So I don't want to go long, but I'm very involved in it. I lead the process. I engage a lot of groups. Those are some of my ideas on budget.
I think the second part to that, though, if you just don't mind touching on it real quick. The second part of what do you feel the board's role is? Because you had two parts there.
Your role is to first of all set out with myself and the CSFO to create some goals and create an overall focus for that budget. And what I mean by that, again, law says that we're going to have 1 month's reserve. How much do you really want to have? What are you comfortable with? What do you want to do facility-wise? In other words, is there something where you really would like a facility update? And if so, you may have to spend some money that really might be spent in another area. So those are major decisions where you as a board's will have to come to an agreement that that's what we need to do. And so if we're going to spend this money over here on a facility or whatever it might be, maybe we're putting in a program, then we may have to give up something somewhere else. And you got to be good with that. So you got to be involved, and you got to know. And another thing too is I, as a superintendent, you can't be surprised. You got to, I've got to make sure that I give you that information all year long. The CSFO is going to create reports, and we're going to analyze we're going to look at our budget analysis every month and make sure that we're on target with our budget. And I've got to be constantly giving you information. The CSFO also has to give you information monthly to make sure, again, that we're staying on target and everything. But the board's involvement is monitoring it month to month, along with me, and to make sure we're hitting our targets, and then also setting goals and smash.
I do have the next question here.
Okay.
But briefly, let's stay on budget just briefly, just touch on, describe how you have been involved in budget development and ongoing fiscal management in the past. Excuse me.
Well, I've been very involved in budgeting the past 6 years in the district that I work in currently. My superintendent's involved me anything from planning the budgets and to the actual managing the budgets throughout the year. My superintendent actually comes to me a lot of times and asks where we have some money available in order to make a purchase on something or to get a counting code or something. So I'm very knowledgeable about the budgeting process and funding, and I'm very involved in it in our district. I think if you talk to him, he'll tell you that. I've been a part of trying to ensure that through the economic hard times that we've had to make some cuts too. We were fortunate we didn't have to cut any personnel, and we didn't cut any programs, but we had a good reserve going into those times, and we were able to maintain it. We did have to make cuts, though, in funds that we normally would spend in that last area that I talked about, those nice to haves. We had to cut out some of the gravy for a few years, and some of those discretionary funds that we had at the central office was zeroed out. We had to limit our travel, limit what we're doing. But I've been responsible for, ensuring that we stay on target with our budgets, setting goals for our budgets, helping ensure our reserves are sound, both in our general fund and our capital fund. We have good sound, I think, management in those areas, and we've got good balances.
I just wanted to ask Dr. Cooper, I know we've heard it, but would you share that budget amount that you have been a part of managing?
Okay.
Current.
Our budget, total budget is 27 point something million dollars. Yours is 29, so it's very, very similar. You may have a little bit more federal money than we have. We got a little more local money than you do. So, you know, I've been involved in that. Now there's about $700-something thousand that I have total control over that no one asks me anything about. Now I may engage others to try to figure out where we need to spend that money. But in other words, I have total control in that amount of money. That's you know, Title II, Title III, ESL, high hopes, at-risk, children's first, local curriculum funds. Those are my funds to control. But again, I engage people for that. But, you know, again, $27 million is our overall budget. We got a close to 3 months operating reserve in our general fund, and we got $6 million in our capital fund.
My last question for you. We just have to come up again here. I'm going to ask it in two parts here. First of all, describe your thoughts on citizen participation in the school matters. That's going to first one, and then we'll come back to that part.
Well, citizen participation in the schools are very important. We have to go beyond parents and grandparents to get support in schools. We have to get support from the whole community. And citizen, when you say citizens, I mean, you're talking about industry leaders, business leaders, people that are just here living in this community. It doesn't matter, from all walks of life. And so everybody needs to feel like as a community that the schools are doing good things for the kids in our community, and that we need to engage them and get their ideas and give them plenty of information about our schools. For example, in Alex City, you better be concerned with those other than just parents and grandparents. Your population, you got about 15,000 people here, and age 50 and above, you got 35% of your total population that are 50 or above. So some of those are grandparents, but some of them are not either. So you better be involved in trying to figure out how you can engage them, because they're important to supporting your schools, both with taxes and in numerous other ways. So they have to be involved in the strategic planning process. They have to be involved. Some of them may be involved in budgeting. You can involve different groups in budgeting if you want to set goals and priorities. They have to be involved in a lot of other things. You know, anything from the advanced ed accreditation process that you have to go through every a few years to you know, trying to figure out how to fund a new I don't know, football stadium or something. I don't know. I'm just making that up. You got a beautiful football stadium. I don't think you need one, but I'm just saying they have to be involved in a lot of different things. You have to bring them in, I got to be out there and be elbow to elbow with the community members. They got to know me, and I got to know them, and get to know people.
Yeah, you just hit on something that's going to lead into the next part of that question. You know the diversity of our schools, of our community. You just talked about age diversity just then. Now let's go to our school system is 62% white, 32% black, and we have the others, Asians, and a couple others, whatever we may have in there. And earlier, when your very first question with Kelly talked about communication, you got to reach out there, you got to engage. How and what is your plan to reach to ensure that each and every that group of diversified we have out there? What's your plan, and what would be your plan to reach everyone and make sure that they're fully informed of what's going on in school?
Well, I've got to establish relationships with all communities. I've got to engage with all communities. I've got to be willing to anything from go to speak to different groups in all communities, to speak in churches, to participate in their activities they have going on. I can't be everywhere all the time, but I got to be visible, and I got to be. It doesn't matter what walk of life you come from. You know, I got to be willing to talk to you. I got to be willing to participate with you. And whether it's speaking at a men's group at church, in a specific community, whatever community it might be, I got to be willing to go do that if I'm invited, or if I can get myself in there. I've got to go out and advocate for our schools to all groups, and I've got to garner support for our schools from all groups, and I got to make people feel like that their ideas are important from all groups, and I can do that. I mean, I work. I think if you call people and talk to the people I work with, they'll tell you that I can. It doesn't matter, rich, poor, white, black, affluent, whatever. I think I can identify with you, and I think I can work with you, and I think I can lead all those groups. So, I think it is important to understand that you got to address and engage every single group throughout your whole community, because we're one community, one team, but we're all different, and you can't just cater to one group in a community. It's kind of like I said before. Us as a board, we got to be a team, and I'm not going to try to divide you into factions. Same thing with the community. We're all one community. We gotta operate together, even though we're different.
The next question, Dr. Cooper, is similar. So, and actually, I think maybe you've addressed one part of it. So I'm going to tweak the question just a little bit.
Okay.
But the question, how do you think the superintendent should be visible in the schools and community? I think you addressed community. How much importance would you place on the superintendent living in this community? And I have one other question after you address those, please.
Well, it's really important for the superintendent to be visible in the schools and the community continuously. What we did today, just walking around the schools, I need to do that often. Not just necessarily like we did it today, but I want to be in the schools. I want to eat lunch in the schools. I want to go visit classrooms. I want to talk to teachers and engage the teachers. I want to take time to talk to students, and I want to see what's going on in the programs during the day at the schools. So you're going to see me. I'm like that now. I'm not required to necessarily, but that's important. And I'm in the schools daily right now, and as the superintendent, I'll do the same thing. I'm not there. I don't want the principal or the teachers, when they see me drive up, run to the other end of the building, or to dread that I drive up. I want them to be comfortable with me being in their schools. I'm not going to come there to try to get them or to catch something. I think I need to be there so much. And again, it's not all the time, but I need to be there often enough to where they're comfortable with that. And then also at the same time, I got to understand what's going on in the school. Same thing with the community. I got to be in the community, be visible. I got to be part of the community organizations. Right now I'm the chairman of the Walker Marion County American Red Cross Board. I've been on that board for 6 years. I've been involved with Rotary before, Chamber of Commerce. I'm part of my church and several committees for that. So I'm very involved in the community. It's so important because that's where you engage with those people. So it's super important for me to be out there, be seen, be visible. I want to sit on the 50-yard line on Friday night at the football game, and I want to be able to go fist bump with all the, I don't know what y'all call them here, the crazies in basketball at the basketball game. I want to be a part of the community. Do what now?
Be involved with the high hooligans.
Yeah.
That's our group
Is
involved.
that your
Something similar, just concerned about recruiting and, getting new and fresh young people to come and be part of our program as opportunities are available. And that would include recruiting people from all walks of life,
That's
diversity, minority students. What's your take on that and your strategy? on
Super important. You're only good as the people you hire.
Right.
You know, and so we got to get out and beat the bushes to get the best possible people to come to our school district and work. And it's very important to have diversity to match the diversity that we were talking about earlier, the teachers. Sometimes you can't find personnel, but you got to do a great job of trying to get out there and find good people. You don't want to hire somebody just because they fit a certain category. You want to hire good people, period. But it's important to have a plan in place where you're out recruiting good people and trying to go to the universities. I go to the universities every year, recruiting, and we hire people from those recruiting fairs. But it's beating the bushes and trying to find good people, whether it's in a recruiting fair or some teacher that works in another county over that teaches math, and we need a math teacher, and I want to go and see if I can get her to come to this school district and work, because we need somebody to teach calculus or whatever. So, you got to do that as a superintendent. You got to expect your principals to be very involved in that. Principals normally are going to do that for their schools, and they're going to recommend people for employment to me, and then I'm going to make that recommendation to you, and we're all involved in that process. But we are going to be recruiting, and we got to try to meet our needs and make sure our staff tries to match our community that we live in and the students that we have in our school. So it's very important.
And you just said something on the second part. You said we need to try to meet that. To what extent would you hold your principals? Let's say, to what extent would you try to encourage them to meet that?
Well, I mean, I would be dishonest with them and tell them what type of individuals that we need to look to recruit. And sometimes, I mean, if I really think principals need to be responsible for making recommendations, but if I have to, in order to make sure that we have a good balance of types of employees and different to meet the needs in different areas, then I would step in as a superintendent to do that. I don't want to have to direct everything they do for as far as hiring personnel, though, because they're the ones that have to work with those people every day, and they need to. But I would expect them to go out though and beat the bushes and try to find some people that fit the needs of their school.
Thank you.
Dr. Cooper, as I've said before, I think this is my favorite question. I get to ask it, so thank you, Dave. We've obviously got 6 very qualified candidates. At this time, I think we would all like to know why we should hire you as the next superintendent of Alexander City Schools.
I think I'm a good instructional leader, and I know instruction. That's very important, okay? I think I'm a good leader. I've had a track record of leading people and developing leaders in our school district for years. I've had 14 people that I've worked with through either training, our prospective administrative training group that I lead, or either people that worked on my leadership team when I was a building principal. 14 people are now leaders, principals, or assistant principals, or district administrators, and that's in the last 9 years. So I think I'm an effective leader. I've gotten instructional achievement results, or I've got student achievement results, a track record of that, have high achieving schools. I'm a good person. I think I'm a person of character. I have faults like we all do, but I think overall you would be happy with the person that I would be. I'm not going to embarrass you as a board or as a school district. I would work to do the best for our kids, and I have kids at heart. I love schools. I'm passionate about schools, and I love kids. I love people. I think I'm a people person. I think I can work with again with all different types of people, and I think I'm a good fit for the school district. I think Alex City is a great place. I've, today witnessed a lot of that. And, it's a good community. And I'm not, looking for a stepping stone. I'm looking for a home, and I think that it's important for the superintendent to be, to live in that community, and that's what I would commit to do if I was selected to be your superintendent. So those are just some ideas why I would like to be your superintendent when I feel like I'm qualified.
The last question that we had supplied to you is just any information you need to share and any questions you have. But leading up to that, I do want to ask one question from the group because we're running short on time.
Yeah.
So very briefly, the question deals with if you could give us just a real quick, and you touched on it, but maybe give us a little more of a snapshot about any elementary administration that you've had.
Sure. I've not worked as a principal or an administrator in a school, a building. I've not been a building administrator. But I have been very involved over the years, working, over the past 6 years, working vertically K-12. I do all, and this is not necessarily instructional, but I do all K-5 placement enrollment for our whole district. I do it. It's my responsibility. I work with that curriculum mapping process that I've told you about. I work all, across all grades in that, and leading that process. Implementation of the college career readiness standards, K-12. I've been involved in that, leading that process. I've been involved in creating those benchmark assessments, K-12. I regularly engage and lead building administrators at the elementary level in a lot of different areas. I coordinate several areas that bleed down into the elementary level or that are part of the elementary level. Like I said, I coordinate all ESL for our district. And I have building coordinators in each school that I've established, and I work with them trying to make sure we identify those ELL kids and then also provide for those kids and meeting our goals in those areas for those kids. So, I've not been a building principal at the elementary level. I've had a lot of experience though working across many different areas with elementary. I think today you heard me engage the principals at the elementary level. I'm not saying that I'm an expert in elementary education, but I think I know it pretty well, and I think I know what goes on there. And good instruction is good instruction. It doesn't matter if you're in first grade or 12th grade. So, and I think I know what good instruction looks like.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Anything else you need to share?
I just want to give you some things. I know we're running a little bit over.
Okay.
This is a CD that I gave the Alabama, if you just take one of those and pass it down. I gave the Alabama School Board Association a works-related document. It's rather large, but I burned a CD. I don't think that you received it from them, and I wanted to make sure that you did. It's just an example of my work across a bunch of different areas over a long period of time. And I've included things in there that are 9 or 10 years old from when I was a building principal, assistant principal even. And because I want you to see that it's not something where I've just put together something in the last 6 months, walked in here and said, I want to be your superintendent, and I'm pretty good at this. I want you to see the history of my work over a long period of time. So that's that. And then if you pass those down and just take one. There's 2 areas that I think that I've really not got to talk a lot about one tonight. 2 areas that I'm passionate about, and I think that I'm very knowledgeable and skilled in. One is curriculum instruction, and number 2 is technology integration in school. And I'm not going to go over this. This will give you some areas and experiences that I have in curriculum instruction that even go beyond my resume, and also some of my ideas related to instructional keys. That first item, and then the second page gives you a lot of information about all the things, everything on this one related to educational technology these are things that I have initiated or either been deeply involved in our district. And that's all the way from classroom instructional matters to the, software that we use in the central office to other different things that help our district run in a more effective manner. So, again, I know we're running long, but those are important. Those are two areas where I have, I'm strong in those areas, and I want you to get that information.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Really good information. Well,
And I've asked you questions all day long, and I've asked our principals questions all day long. I think I've got a lot of great information. I'm all about questions. But because of time and because I feel like I've asked a lot today, I'm not going to ask you any questions. And then I like to, if we're through, I like to make one last final statement by saying that again, I've really enjoyed going around today with you as a board and getting to know you a little bit and seeing your schools and your community. It's a great community, great schools. You got good leaders, you got good teachers in there. You got great looking kids. The most priceless thing today was when we were at what school were we at? Stevens and principal.
No, it was Jim Pierce.
It was Jim
It's Jim
Pierce.
Pearson.
Yes,
Yes,
yeah.
and the principal's walking down the hall in front of us a little bit, and she walked up to a child, and the child hugged her, and there's 2 or 3 started hugging her, and I turned to one of the board members and I said, yeah, she's that principal who gets all the hugs. And as soon as I got the word hug out, this child comes up and starts hugging me. And so that's the most priceless thing all day long that I've experienced, and because I love kids and I love the school. You got some good things here, and I would be honored to work in your school system and to lead your school system. Thank you all for having me.
thank you. We once again appreciate your time. I know it's a long day for you as well. We appreciate it. We got to know you better, and appreciate the time you put into this. Very much so. So with that, we are done, and that concludes the interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.